Am I the a-hole for cutting out almost everyone in my life? I, male 29, have recently been having a tough time with life. Job is stressful, barely pays enough to cover the bills. You know, normal life stressors. I have not been handling it well and my mind has gone to some pretty dark places. I don't have any actual plans to hurt myself, but have experienced suicidal ideation. For those of you who don't know what that is, it is essentially reoccurring thoughts of suicide with no real plan to follow through. After trying to dig myself out of that hole and realizing I couldn't do it alone, I opened up to my girlfriend, female 28 of 4 years, about these thoughts. Big mistake. My girlfriend panicked. She knew I had no active plans to follow through on my thoughts, but the thought of potentially losing me was apparently too much to handle. After we talked, and at a time I thought it was a good, productive, and helpful conversation, I left her on to the store to get a snack for later. While I was gone, my girlfriend called the police. I returned home to see 2 cop cars in my driveway. They told me they were here to take me to the hospital. She evidently told my parents as well. I later found out they were surprised I was having these thoughts, but if I was, they agreed with a temporary hold. I didn't raise a fuss, but I was not a happy camper. I went along. I was placed on a 3-day hold in a rundown piece of trash psych ward in my county. I was so mad, I refused to cooperate. I didn't speak to any of the doctors or nurses. I just sat in complete silence for 3 straight days. On the 2nd day, my parents and girlfriend came to visit. I told the nurse I wasn't taking visitors and they were turned away. It was an awful experience. One of the worst in my life. Being held in a room with a person who thought they were a literal god and would bash his head into a wall. Food was garbage. I had to take pills. And if I didn't, I was threatened with divorce. Doctors didn't have any evidence I was actually suicidal, so after 3 days, they had no choice but to release me. My girlfriend and parents were there to pick me up when I was released. They seemed happy to see me and asked all sorts of questions, mostly about how I was feeling. I didn't respond. I walked straight past them and walked home, 3 miles in the rain. When I got home, I told my girlfriend we were done, that she had until the end of the week to pack her stuff and get out of my house. I told her I no longer trust or love her and never wanted to see her again. My parents berated me, saying that was too harsh and she was doing what she thought was best. I told them if they wanted to take her side, so be it. I would be done with them too. I blocked their numbers and told them if they stepped a foot on my property, I would call the police for trespassing. Oh, and on top of everything else, my insurance wouldn't cover my stay, so now I'm $10,000 even further in the hole. Am I the a-hole for dumping my girlfriend and cutting off my parents? Now for the top comments. As someone who has permanent ideations, I'm so glad my spouse understands me. Psych wards are crap holes and are only a help to those in severe crisis. Not a-hole. You may be able to challenge the bill and at least get it reduced. I'm sorry this happened to you. Going to call the hospital and the county health department tomorrow to see if I can get that bill reduced. Thanks. Make sure to request an itemized bill and talk to the billing department. A lot of the time they can reduce it as a hardship. They also sometimes have charities to help with it through the billing department. If you're in the United States, check out NAMI. They actually help people like us and make the system treat us like humans. As someone who has been suicidal, not a-hole, calling the police on your significant other because they told you they feel suicidal is cruel and inappropriate. There are whole crisis lines for that stuff. You need a therapist and psychiatrist, not a nurse staring at you to make sure you don't end yourself for 3 days. That's kinda how I feel. I don't mind her trying to get help for me, but in her panic, she chose the nuclear option and messed up my life even more than it was. Absolutely. She was ignorant, as are the people in this thread. You can tell who doesn't have experience with psych hospitals. In my professional opinion, all they do is load you up on heavy meds and watch you so you don't hurt yourself. That can be incredibly helpful for people who have disorders that must be heavily medicated like psychosis and mania, as well as for people who have actively attempting suicide. Some people with depression, like you, have it because of life circumstances. You need a therapist. Maybe don't cut them off for worrying, but it's very fair for you to be angry and take space for them calling the police on you. Heck, I probably would have broken up with my partner if they did that. Thank you for your understanding. Those 3 days were hell. I don't even know what pills they gave me, but they made me physically ill and all looped out of my mind. They typically start with sleeping pills/antipsychotics because those help really suicidal people a lot. Probably some Seroquel. I know you said your insurance doesn't cover mental health, but call your county's community mental health center and they'll see you on a sliding scale fee. Next story. Am I the a-hole for demanding that my girlfriend apologize to my son and refusing to kick him out? I have been with my girlfriend for 3 years. I have a 13-year-old son, James, and she has an 11-year-old son, Mark. Mark and James have different bedtimes. Mark goes to bed at 8 and James goes to bed at 9. Mark also has severe ADHD, autism, and a lot of emotional regulations problems. Due to his issues, my son isn't particularly fond of him. They butt heads a lot, mainly because my son doesn't think that they get fair treatment, and usually it is surrounding bedtime. Mark often fights us to go to sleep, and by the time we finally get him to stop throwing a tantrum, it's around 8:45. James feels that he should be able to stay up later because Mark is awake until 8:45. Which is 45 minutes past his bedtime. So, at that point, James runs his mouth nearly every night about it not being fair to him, and that he should be able to stay up 45 minutes later. However, this also happens even when it takes only 10 minutes to get Mark in bed. James gets pissed off, runs his mouth and says he should be able to stay up an hour later because Mark was in bed at 8:10 versus 8 p.m. when he was supposed to be. My son can be a dink sometimes when it comes to running his mouth, and he's been spoken to so many times. Grounded more often than he should be as well, because he is disrespectful when running his mouth. So in no way am I condoning his horrible behavior here. I've been trying to correct it, but he's a kid, and he's just being an a-hole. Anywho, at 8:15 last night, my girlfriend was trying to get Mark down for bed, and it's becoming a problem because it's just a bad night. James goes into Mark's room where my girlfriend was and says, "So I'm staying up an hour later then." My girlfriend says, "No, you're not actually. Get out." This sends Mark into a conniption because now he thinks James is staying up an hour later because James is running his mouth and Mark doesn't process information the same way we do. So it sends Mark into a new round of fits. James didn't leave the room and instead says, "Tell me how this is fair. Explain this to me. Why is he staying up every damn night but I can't?" My girlfriend again told him to leave the room. I go in, and before I can even open my mouth, James says something under his breath, and my girlfriend loses her cool. I have never seen her be anything other than a kind, overly patient woman, so this was a complete shock to the system. She screams, "Get the heck out, and mind your own freaking business." James immediately shuts up and walks out. But apparently that wasn't enough because she just snapped. Again, this is not normal. She followed him out to the hallway and said, "Better yet, pack your things. You're no longer welcome in my house. Go back to your mom's." I step in completely, told James he is once again grounded for everything and to go to his room, and then told my girlfriend to step outside and calm down. She's still flipping out at this point and says, "If that kid is still in my house by the time I come back in here, I will call the cops and have him removed. I am so freaking tired of that little puke disrespecting me, and you doing nothing to stop it." She goes outside. I go talk to James, tell him he's out of line, and this will be the last time he opens his mouth to run it. When my girlfriend comes back in, I tell her she needs to go apologize to my son, and that he will not be moving out actually. She says, "I will evict you if he doesn't leave." Actually, no, I think you need to leave anyways. I'm freaking done. She told my sister today that she truly wants both of us gone, and took off for the day with her and her kid, and told me I had better be out of her house before she returns. I have nowhere to go and don't plan to leave, but I still think she's being ridiculous. Am I the a-hole for refusing to kick my son out and demanding she apologize to my son? Edit. Sorry, forgot this detail. I have been living in her home for 3 months. Bought it long before we met. But technically, she would have to serve me an eviction to get me out of here. Pack your bags and leave. It's over. Be an example to your son and keep your mouth shut on the way out. LMAO. No kidding. Or don't, and show him how immature running your mouth sounds. You and your son need to leave. If you force your now ex-girlfriend to evict you, you will really have nowhere to go. Once you have an eviction on your credit report, no landlord will touch you with a 10-foot pole. I am a little baffled as to why I thought, after all what he wrote, that there was a space where she needed to apologize to his little whore of a son he has been allowing to make her life hell all this while. Because OP is the protagonist. The concept that he has moved himself and his teen into a living condition that isn't working can't possibly be his own fault. The fact that he has nowhere to go can't be something he's expected to handle. It must be the girlfriend's fault. OP really buried the lid on it being girlfriend's house. Who else wants to hear the girlfriend's side of the story? I think we did. I am so freaking tired of that little puke disrespecting me and you doing nothing to stop it. I feel really sorry for her. Parenting her son cannot be easy. I think this is the biggest factor here that is overlooked. She's exhausted from parenting a neurodivergent kid prone to big emotions and behaviors, yet has been consistently patient and kind to OP's naughty kid the entire time. Of course she snapped. Who wouldn't at some point? I want to give a little grace to the older kid, since we don't know his situation. Like, what was a divorce like? Does he get the parenting he needs? I guess it's obvious from the way the dad is talking about him. They've only lived there 3 months. Where was he before? Did he change schools? I think a lot of these factors could have been driving his behavior, but we don't really know. But OP needed to manage this the moment it began. Maybe the kid needs therapy, but at least something more than just grounding and having his electronics taken away. Next story. Am I the a-hole for telling my fiancé that she's useless in an emergency and shouldn't brag about how tough she is? I, 25 male, have a child named Amy, 1 female, with my fiancé Jess, 24 female. We live together in one of the safest cities in the United States. About 4 months ago, Jess and I were walking home at night with Amy sleeping in her stroller. It was a suburban road that we've walked down hundreds of times. Suddenly, we heard several loud banging noises from around a corner. My first instinct was to check out where they came from, and so I jogged a couple of steps forward to peek and see what was going on. As it turns out, 2 teens were hitting the window of an SUV with a baseball bat. I watched them run away, get into a car, and peel out. I turned around to see Jess, but she wasn't there. I looked back the way we came to see her about 50 yards away, running like her life depended on it. I called out to her a few times, but she was obviously scared out of her mind and didn't hear me. A few minutes later, I called her on her phone and she picked up. I explained that it was just a couple of dumb kids with a baseball bat. Jess sheepishly walked up a few minutes later, and I couldn't help but laugh at her. She said that she grew up in a rough neighborhood. She did not, and mistook the sounds for gunshots. I actually did grow up in a bad neighborhood, and told her they sounded nothing like gunshots. But what really stuck with me was her first instinct in an emergency was to abandon a 9-month-old baby and her fiancé to fend for themselves, as she protected her own hide. Well, last night we were watching a documentary together, and there was a scene with a woman who was frozen in terror during an animal attack. Jess scoffed and said that if it were her, she would have fought back, especially if Amy were with her. I looked at her for a few seconds and then said, "Yeah, you don't really know what you do." Jess insisted that she would have fought tooth and nail against any threat against our daughter. To which I responded, "Even a couple of kids breaking a car window with a baseball bat? Let's call it for what it is. You're kind of useless in an emergency." Jess stood up, called me stupid, and walked away. It felt really crappy because she was victim blaming the woman in the documentary when she showed herself to be a coward of comic proportions. Were my words too harsh? Now for the top comments. If she grabbed the kid and ran, I wouldn't call her a coward. Kiddo safety comes first. But to leave the baby? The heck? She wasn't frozen in terror, but she subscribed to the mantra, "I only have to outrun the baby in the stroller." See, what you actually want to do is grab the baby and run, so that you have something to throw back at your pursuers to occupy them while you save your skin. Besides, you can always make another baby, can't make another you. Not a-hole. She said she thought they were gunshots, so she ran leaving her baby. I grew up Philly, I hear gunshots daily. And when there was gunshots near my old house, I grabbed my oldest daughter who was 3 at a time and I covered her with my entire body. She did the complete opposite. There was a shooting in front of my old house, and I was putting the kids to sleep when it happened. I grabbed the kids and jumped on top of them before I really knew what was happening. I could not even dream running away just to save myself. Last story. Am I the a-hole for leaving my boyfriend in a different state? I, 26 female, need some perspective on a recent situation involving my boyfriend, 30 male, during a trip to Florida. Throughout the trip, he kept comparing me to other women. Let's be honest, women in Miami often look like they just stepped off a magazine cover. Now, I don't wear a lot of makeup, but I'm comfortable with my natural look. I believe in embracing authenticity and loving myself as I am. However, my boyfriend seemed infatuated with these women who looked like models. He couldn't stop mentioning how much better I'd look if I put in more effort like this girl right here, or that girl over there, which made me feel inadequate and insecure. Hearing your boyfriend of 3 years say, "You'd be more attractive if you looked like her," doesn't make a woman feel good at all. The tipping point came when we were at a restaurant, and he started telling me about how much better I'd look if I wore some more makeup and maybe showed a bit more skin. I decided to switch up the scenario and told him that if I'm expected to look better, then he needs to lose some weight and maybe work on getting ahead of his hereditary male pattern baldness, a courtesy of his father. After this, he had a loud outburst, essentially berating me for not looking as attractive as the women around us. I was crushed. Here I was, trying to enjoy a vacation with someone I cared about, only to be publicly humiliated for not fitting some superficial standard of beauty. Feeling hurt, disrespected, and utterly fed up, I made a decision to cancel his flight and flew back to California alone. I refused to be with someone who values superficial appearances over genuine connection and respect. Now, his family is pressuring me to pay for his accommodations and flight back home because he has no money. They seem to think I owe him something for his outburst. But I can't shake the feeling that I made a right decision for my own well-being. Am I the a-hole for leaving him behind to figure out on his own? Edit. I forgot to mention that I paid for our tickets and hotel room because he couldn't afford it but wanted to travel. Hence, why he also couldn't get home. Hence the phrase, "Never bite the hand that feeds you." Ha 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 ha. This dude is a wanker. And it makes me so happy that his type only goes less attractive with age, and he will end up with someone he'll be comparing to you. The dude can dish it out but can't take it. The man-child is not your problem. Or if we're going by traditional gender roles and norms, in which the woman is supposed to look pretty and take care of all things domestic, then as the man he should be the financial provider, right? And yet Opie was the one paying the vacation, and this 30-year-old man can't even get himself back home and called his mommy and daddy to tell Opie that she's mean. Lol. Maybe a model-esque girl in Miami with lots of makeup on can pay for his hotel and flight. Also, tell him good luck. Lol. Not the a-hole. None of those Miami girls are going anywhere near him if he's broke.